Former Wisconsin Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen is my very special guest today, Wednesday, July 29, 2020. I'm Ben Dryden. You're watching DrydenWire Live. Special thank you to Barron County Sheriff Chris Fitzgerald, who was my guest yesterday for our now weekly-ish Positive Tuesday with Ben and Fitzy show presented by Embrace. You can watch a recording of that show and all of our DrydenWire live chats on our Facebook page, our website, DrydenWire.com, or on our YouTube channel. Just search DrydenWire. All right, I'm very excited to chat with my guest today. First timer on DrydenWire Live, former Wisconsin Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen. J.B., good morning. How are you? And thanks for coming on.
Good morning, Ben. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Well, of course. I think I saw something yesterday when I Googled your name early this morning and just like recent news. You were just on, I think, MSNBC something yesterday, weren't you?
Yeah, a couple of days ago, MSNBC. Been doing a lot of media lately, kind of came out of the shadows, been staying close to home a little bit since I left office, but when you find a good cause, it's time to come out and show your face a little bit.
Yeah, and there's a lot that I want to get to. Of course, we're going to be talking about VoteSafe Wisconsin. But first, when I this last weekend, when I knew there was a possibility of having you coming on, the first thing I thought, no kidding, no joke, I'm like, man, that dude's got the coolest name I've ever heard. Do you get that a lot of like actual compliments on your name? I mean, J.B. Van Hollen, you could have gone into any profession, any career, and you'd be like, yeah, that fits.
You know, it's the first time I've gotten it.
What?
You know, I did hundreds of parades back in the days when I was running for office, and I got a lot of the drunk guys on the parade routes yelling out, Van Halen! You know, I got that a lot.
That's awesome.
And I got a lot of people asking me what JB stands for, but nobody's ever told me I had a cool name.
Well, trust me, when you don't, I mean, when your name is Ben and you look like this, your options are limited. So I recognize cool names.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Chris Fitzgerald was on yesterday, and he had said that he recently saw you at a hockey tournament in Superior. Please tell me that you remember having the conversation, but you had no idea who he was, so I can totally rib him next time he's on the show.
I'm sorry to say that you can't. Chris is a great guy. I tell you what, he's one of those guys who proved to me, well, I probably knew this before, but reaffirmed my belief that, you know, partisanship matters too often to too many people because, you know, I've run repeatedly as a Republican. He's run repeatedly as a Democrat. And he and I have agreed on damn near everything. We worked wonderfully together, as I did with your dad when he was sheriff. Yeah. Both great guys, both worked across party lines, both cared more about doing their job than they did about pleasing anybody in any particular party. So I have a great respect for Chris.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Sorry, yeah, I hate to do that to you.
Yeah, and that is actually one of the things that I've always respected about Chris. That he will give props to people who deserve it. And he doesn't really care if his own party doesn't like it or if the other party thinks, hey, you should be Republican now. He's like, I'm running as a Democrat for this reason, but listen, let's just get some things done. So I've always liked that about him. So before we get into what the main reason you're on for people who don't really know who you are, give us a little bio. Obviously, going from your career, I looked up all the things that you've done, all of your job titles that you've had. I mean, it would take us half a show to get through all of this stuff. So if you can kind of put it in a synopsis of how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, I always hate to do this because it sounds like you're blowing your own horn or whatever. But I guess I like to frame it by saying, I've gone through a lot of jobs, kind of climbed the ladder, but I don't consider myself a political climber, and I think there's two ways to show that. I voluntarily left the Attorney General's office despite the fact that I had good numbers and could have run probably successfully for another term. Never ran for a different office. Some say a higher office. I don't think there are higher offices, but a different office. And all my jobs have really been in the rule of law enforcement community. I actually started my career as a public defender in Spooner. And that's where I first met your dad, who wasn't sheriff yet then either. And we got to know each other a little bit. And then he ran for sheriff while I was still up there in the Spooner area. and went on, became district attorney in two different northern Wisconsin counties, both Bayfield County and Ashland counties. Was an assistant U.S. attorney down in Madison. Was later appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. attorney for the Western District of Wisconsin out of Madison. Left that job because of the Hatch Act. You can't run for political office in that job, and I decided I wanted to run for attorney general. So I left that office, went into private practice for a little while, and for the country mouse in the big city, I had to campaign my butt off to be elected attorney general, and we squeaked by during an otherwise extremely tough year for Republicans. Served 8 years as Attorney General. One of my last years, I served as president of the National Association of Attorneys General, which, of course, requires you to work with AGs in both parties, the majority of whom were Democrats. And all of them were great experiences. I love law enforcement. I'm a big supporter of law enforcement, probably a bigger supporter now than ever of law enforcement. And it's why I've kind of come back out a little bit, because voting is extremely important. And I've been asked to take a role on that we'll talk about coming up, and it's exciting.
Well, when I looked at your little bio on, I think right now you are part of, you're a senior advisor at Michael Best Strategies, correct?
That's one of my roles.
One of them.
Well, quite a number.
In that bio on that's where I just found some information. It also says you're an honorary, now I'm not sure if we can talk about this, honorary 33-degree Mason. I don't know how many degrees there are, but that sounds high.
Yeah, that's all there are.
Okay.
So, no, I absolutely, we could talk about it. Masonic organization is probably the oldest organization known to man right now. I've been a member of a number of different lodges, including one in your area. A lot of former law enforcement in your area have been members of that lodge, and I went on to become the head of the Masons for the state of Wisconsin during my first year as Attorney General, so that became very busy as well. 33rd degree is just an honor they give to people who have other accomplishments in life.
Oh, sure.
So it was great to receive, but it's nothing that I earned.
Well, there you go. Those are my favorite kind of titles. The ones, you don't even have to earn it.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get to what we really want to talk about here, which is VoteSafe Wisconsin. So on July 21st, a news release we had published on DrydenWire, which I just republished on our homepage for people to read, put that this morning with the title, Wisconsin's current and former attorneys general launch bipartisan coalition to ensure safe voting practices during COVID-19. So first part that stood out to me was the bipartisan coalition. Mm-hmm. Because we were just talking about Chris Fitzgerald and Dad and yourself on Republican or a Democrat. In the politically charged climate that we're in right now, whether that's, there's a lot of reasons for it. Partly also it's an election cycle, so everything's political right now. Mm-hmm. How in the world is this bipartisan? Nothing is bipartisan.
Well, I tell you what, the coalition, which is a national coalition, I think has done a great job of putting together a platform that at least people in both parties in some states can agree on. There's a lot of, I think, division about a lot of policy issues. But I think there's one thing that most people in both parties agree upon is that everybody who has the legal right and is eligible to vote should be able to do so if they so choose. What's really happened, I think, in Wisconsin and a lot of society is there's so much political wrangling over how voting should occur, and so much legal wrangling, fighting over different policies that get set over how voting should occur. And with COVID being here and people not necessarily knowing whether they should safely go to a polling place, and combine that with what's happened in the April election, I think there's an awful lot of confusion out there. And really, our bipartisan coalition is here to encourage people to vote, to tell people really how safe and secure it really is in Wisconsin to vote, and to try to explain that to them so that they can vote early, they can vote legally, and we don't have to have this confusion out there.
Okay, so we're gonna, if you'll allow, we're gonna kind of break this down as Shelley Police Chief Dave Wilson always tells me, break it down Barney style. So for people who don't know what this is, first, what is this exactly? Actually, let's just start there. How would you explain this to someone who's they're a voter, they're going to vote? What are their options right now? Of course, there's the absentee ballot, right? And then you can just go and vote. Mm-hmm. And where does this fall into place in the current voting?
Sure. Well, first of all, what it is exactly is a bit of a work in progress. So in Wisconsin, you've got roughly, 3, 4 ways to vote, I guess. Obviously, you can show up on election day and vote in person. You can, in many places, you can vote early. They have kind of polling places in the municipal clerk's office or whatever that's open, and you can show up, and it's like election day, and you vote in person. Of course, you can show up at your municipal clerk's office, request and fill out an absentee ballot request form and vote absentee on site, or you can request an absentee through the mail and get an absentee ballot and then vote through the mail.
Okay.
As far as the in-person or the showing up at a polling place issues, what we're trying to do is make sure people know that I think clerks who do a great job out there have learned from that election cycle where it was difficult. COVID had just started then. People were scared. They didn't know whether they could safely have a polling place. Since then, they've learned a lot. They've got more staffing. More people are on board. They've gotten time to implement safety procedures where I think you can go into a polling place and vote very safely now. And we want people to understand that if they want to vote in person. You can also request an absentee ballot. And in Wisconsin, absentee ballot is not like mail-in voting that a lot of people talk about. And it's important for us to make sure there's no confusion about this. People have been using the term mail-in voting, and I see it a lot in the media, and the president has even used it. And it's a very vague term. What exactly does that mean? In Wisconsin, we almost don't care. In Wisconsin, you can request an absentee ballot, and with a witness signature and an ID, so proof of who you are, you can vote through the mail by absentee. It's very safe, it's very secure, and it's very accessible. We want to make sure people know that. So when you ask what Safe Vote Wisconsin is all about, that's what it's really about. It's making sure that the people are educated about how safe and secure it really is to vote in Wisconsin, how we don't need to expand the number of ways or the type of ways that you need to vote. Hopefully, we will eliminate political controversy over changing our voting requirements, and we'll hopefully eliminate legal wrangling over those purported changes as we've had in the past, so that people know how to vote and can vote early, and people know how to safely vote and can vote on election day, and they're not going to be confused about what they can and can't do.
There is, as we spoke about earlier, this divide of Republicans and Democrats. One probably would prefer more vote in person. One party would probably prefer a little bit more of the absentee ballots, which is why, again, this is interesting that this is bipartisan. Why do you think that this is a bipartisan coalition where you're kind of removing the political part of it, and both parties are on board, especially when we see a lot of things, and maybe it is just the media who is trying to drive that wedge. Maybe there really isn't one. I'm not sure.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. I think with the co-chairs of this VoteSafe coalition being myself and the current Democrat Attorney General Josh Kaul, I think we're both in it because we both believe in the importance of people who are eligible to vote to be able to do so. Sure. But we're also believers in enforcing the laws that we have on our books. That's what the job of the Attorney General is to make sure that you are the law enforcer in the state of Wisconsin. We have got very safe and secure and accessible laws on the books in Wisconsin to allow you to vote. There is no reason why we should be pushing for more liberal or looser laws that would perhaps eliminate the security we have in our current voting system. If you want to enforce the laws on the books, you need to get out there and tell people what they are, and so that they understand them and they can act within them. You talk about the difference. Well, both parties use absentee ballots, and both parties encourage the use of absentee ballots. I think they're theoretically out there, and I don't know that it's accurate. I've never crunched any statistics, but I think a lot of the Democrats believe a higher voter turnout helps them, therefore absentee ballots help them.
That's what I've heard.
Republicans kind of believe that, well, we get the older vote, the older people who can't necessarily get to the polls, so if we can get absentee ballots in their hands, that it kind of helps us. The reality is I don't want to say I don't care. I mean, I care who gets elected, but I want people, if they're legally entitled to vote, to be able to do so if they want to, regardless of their stripes. And so let's make sure that all these people know how to get an absentee ballot and have the opportunity to use it if they wish. But if for some reason they think that that's flawed, they're not comfortable, they won the lottery ticket and they don't want to necessarily mail it in the mail. They'd like to deliver it personally because it's that important to them.
Yeah.
By all means, let them show up at the polls. I can tell you personally, I voted both ways. August 11th, I plan on showing up at the polls, not because I have any great distrust, but I have great confidence in the safety. It's not very far away. It's not very difficult. And I voted there the last 2 elections, and so I'm very comfortable with it.
You said this was a national coalition, correct?
Correct.
And so when do you happen to know about when that kind of started? Is it just recently or
recently?
Okay.
They just started rolling out in the last few months. We announced this coalition in Wisconsin here just last week.
Yep. And how did you get involved? Did they call you, or did you see this and go, "Dang, I want to be a part of that"? How did this all kind of come about?
Yeah, they reached out to me.
Well, with a name like J.B. Van Hollen, I mean, geez. We totally got to get that guy on here.
They want to make sure that they had, I guess, what they considered reputable leaders from both sides of the political aisle to get involved. And so early on when they started this, as far as Democrats, they don't just have Attorney General Josh Call. They've got Mayor Tom Barrett from Milwaukee. They got David Crowley, who's the Milwaukee County Executive, and they got Sarah Godlewski, who's our Wisconsin State Treasurer. On the Republican side, there's myself. There's former Governor Scott McCallum, former Congressman Reed Ribble, and we, I think, because of that, have a very balanced approach from people who are considered kind of a little more conservative and a little more liberal on both sides of the aisle. And then, of course, they had to pick people who were going to be the spokespeople on both sides, and I guess I came the cheapest.
Well, I did see in all those people, and you just listed all of them that were a part of this coalition. My takeaway when I looked at the names that were on this was the first thing I think people would probably, the average person probably look at is, how can I see, okay, what's your agenda, right? What is what partisan agenda is this really? But those are legit names. And it really kind of debunks any idea that this is a partisan thing.
It does. I look back from my days as Attorney General, and I never worked with David and Sarah, but I certainly worked with Mayor Barrett, and quite a bit. And, many times we disagreed, but we disagreed gentlemanly. But there are many times we were able to work together on the mortgage foreclosure crisis and a number of other things that greatly impacted Milwaukee. And I think this is one of those areas where people can look and say, hey, it's very important and we can work together, and it really isn't a conservative or liberal issue. So we're looking to do a couple of things to kind of get back a little bit to the VoteSafe. We're looking to obviously educate the general public. And of course, the best way for us to be able to do that is what we're doing right now. We do earned media. We get out there in every manner we can, and we educate voters as to how easy it is to vote and how safe it is to vote. And another way we do that is we grow this coalition. That is the group of core leaders who were at the ground floor when we kicked this off. We're looking to get other big names on board on both sides of the aisle, but we're looking to get ordinary citizens. I say ordinary meaning not in elective office, citizens who can give us a lot of input and can help spread the word a lot. We're looking hopefully to get municipal clerks. We're looking to grow this coalition between now and November without end, and hopefully utilizing other people maybe to get the word out locally as well. They'll get a little more local play than some of us potentially could.
Yeah.
And if we have to, we might do some sort of, paid media. It really depends upon how this all works.
Sure. How do you reach out to those clerks and those local public officials?
Yeah, once again, we're doing it right now. And the other thing, as I mentioned earlier, it's a work in progress.
Sure.
We're contemplating those things as we progress. Obviously, it's not too difficult to get a list of local clerks and do a mailing.
Sure.
So there's a number of different ways we can encourage people to get involved.
Since you have been going on and doing a lot of media stuff, what are the questions, the most frequently asked questions that you're getting right now?
Well, the most frequently asked question is, what exactly are we doing? What is our agenda and what is our plan? Well, it's really important for me to point out is there isn't a policy agenda, okay? We will never be working to influence the legislature to change the law one way or the other. We think we have a group of laws in Wisconsin that make it voting very accessible, yet still secure. You still have to show a photo ID.
Hmm.
The polling places are going to be open and staffed, but they're still going to be safe because people have had time to implement it with more people and better procedures. So our only agenda is to get the word out with no policy agenda. And I think that that's a real important thing to clarify. And the other part of that question is, what is it we're trying to do, or what is it we're going to do? And that's why I use the term a work in progress.
Mm-hmm.
I always was a little troubled running for political office when people say, what are you going to do in this category and that category and that category? And, of course, you're never going to get elected if you don't have a plan. But what I wanted a lot of times say is, it's kind of difficult to figure out until you're in the office
right.
and you actually get to see what's currently going on.
Yeah.
It's hard to know how to fix the engine until somebody's brought the car to your shop so you can take a look at it and see what's wrong with it. So we know what we want to accomplish, and that's educate and get the word out. Exactly the best ways to do it, we'll see. I'll give another example. When I was first running for office, there was a backlog at the crime lab. A horrible backlog. It was a big problem that very few people knew about it. By the time the campaign was over, the general public all knew about it, and they were screaming for it to be fixed. That's what you really need to do. You get the word out, and you have people saying, oh, I don't know if I'm going to be able to vote, or I don't know how to vote, or I don't know how to request an absentee ballot. Come election day, everybody's going to say, I voted, and it really was pretty safe, or it was pretty secure, or whatever category they chose.
Yeah, it's funny you brought up when you were running for office, and you kind of have to be in the office to really know. I've always wanted to be a fly on the wall for like the president when first gets elected. Promises all these things, I'm going to do it, and then that first morning meeting with the national security and finds out all this information and goes, holy crap, like 90% of my plan I can't even do because now I know stuff that the general public doesn't know, and I can't do a lot of these things. That's got to be kind of just a shock. Because everything that you said you wanted to do, you might not be able to, or you might have a different plan after you start getting into it. There needs to be a level of flexibility there. But I find it interesting when you're running for something, you kind of can't be flexible. You need a specific plan. I think that's kind of stupid. But what pushback, if any, have you received so far?
None whatsoever. Matter of fact, the media exposure we've gotten from media sources that are considered liberal or conservative have all been encouraging. They've all been positive. They've all been objective and reported straight up the line what we're doing. There hasn't been, when we first started this, I expected maybe Josh would get some pushback from the Democrats saying, no, we need to mail ballots to every citizen in Wisconsin versus right now we're mailing ballot applications. The Wisconsin Elections Commission is mailing ballot applications to 2.7 million registered voters in the state of Wisconsin. So everybody who's already taken the time and cared enough to register at one juncture or another is getting an application to explain how you vote absentee. That's half our population. That's about what turns out to vote usually. That's pretty considerable. Sure. I expected him to get a little more pushback because maybe they want more people to vote on the Democrat side. I expected to get some pushback from people saying, well, wait a minute, you're crossways with President Trump, who's saying he doesn't want mail-in voting, yet he has said he's going to vote absentee. And nobody's played that politics so far. Everybody's been straight up the middle saying, good for you guys.
Well, give it time.
Yeah.
So was there any takeaways? Let's say this started a little while 3 months ago. Let's say this was, instead of last week announcing this coalition, let's say it was 3 months ago. How would you have seen that impact, let's say the May, was that the 11th or 12th, May, the special election for the 7th Congressional District? Mm-hmm. So if you had a couple of months before that special election and this coalition was already established at that point, how would you have seen, or what do you think that would have changed? Not necessarily in the total votes, or I'm sorry, not like percentages, but you think you would see higher votes? Is that kind of part of the goal of this?
I think we would have seen a higher voter turnout. I think still at that time, people were concerned about the safety of actually going to the polling places. And many of those people who have never voted absentee in the past, I think it's easy to say, well, you just call up your local clerk. Well, I live in a little rural township in northern Wisconsin. The local clerk works out of his house. It's not like there's a municipal office where you just contact that office. And there's I got to tell you, even with me, there's a little discomfort. It's like, do I want to call them at home, really?
Yeah,
And
right.
then what time of day do you call them? And and so there's, I think that there's some of that confusion out there that we're hoping to lift. And I think mailing the ballot applications to everybody who's registered currently eliminates some of that. So I think there will be a better voter turnout because of this program. And I think that there would have been a better turnout in earlier elections if that would have occurred as well.
WI.votesafe.us. That's where people can go to find more information, right?
Correct.
All right, I just want to make sure I had that written down right. What are the while you're doing the kind of the media, I don't want to say blitz, but getting the word out a lot more, is there anything that you really wish that you had the chance to talk about, but just never kind of came up in a conversation about this?
I think the most significant thing that we can talk about is if you choose to vote absentee is to do it early. And we haven't talked much about this yet because most interviews are too short. So, there was some confusion in the last election cycles, or I shouldn't say confusion. There were just some outright screw-ups by the Postal Service. Ballots that were mailed in plenty of time never got counted because they didn't arrive in time to where they were supposed to go. And even though the Postal Service, I think, is been awakened to this, and hopefully the same problems won't occur. Another bipartisan group, Senators Ron Johnson and Tammy Baldwin, the Democrat and Republican U.S. Senators from Wisconsin, actually sent a letter to the Postal Service saying, hey, get this straight this time. It's still really important for people to send their ballots in early. You can't send them in too early. It's not like if they receive it too early that it's not going to count. So we want to make sure that you take out the hiccups of the problems with the Postal Service and problems in any given polling place by making sure the ballots get sent early, which is why we are out here 4 months ahead of the November election anyway, but we have one in August as well.
And just so we can avoid any possible confusion about the August 11th, have we passed some dates already for requesting things for people who don't know this about the August 11th? What would you recommend they do right now if they didn't plan on going to vote in person?
Right now, I would encourage them to go on the Wisconsin Elections Commission website. And of course, you just enter Wisconsin Elections Commission and you're going to get that website. I don't need to give you the exact way to get in. And it'll tell you how to request an absentee ballot. Make the request online now. Get your ballot and turn around and vote. There's plenty of time between now and the August 11th election for that turnaround to occur. Of course, you wait another week, that's not the case.
Yeah, that's coming up quick.
It is, and it's an election that generally speaking isn't going to get a lot of turnout, A, because of the time of the year, B, because of the nature of the things that are on the ballot. But I just read this morning, I think there have been 785,000, if I have the number right, absentee ballots. I don't recall whether it was requested or cast already in this election. A lot of people are getting the joke before we even got out the message.
Yeah. So this was, obviously with it coming on just now, August 11th, we're hoping to get some of the word out. That's why you're doing a lot of these things now. But probably one of the bigger impact is going to be the general election and really kind of hitting that stuff hard. With COVID being what it is, and which is ever changing, it seems, is this coalition kind of started because of that, or was that a motivating factor, or was this really, we were going to do it anyway, but now because of COVID, we kind of moved up the timetable?
No, we could call this the COVID coalition.
Okay.
Really, COVID has thrown an uncertainty into things that caused this coalition to be created to try to correct or at least minimize. Sure. The wrangling over how people can vote really didn't exist much before COVID. But we did see in Wisconsin, especially, a lot of proposed legislation just before the election, the court making a ruling, striking down parts of that just before the elections in April. The Postal Service issues, which I think are partially COVID related. A lot of people not turning out to vote. 5 polling places open in Milwaukee only. So there were definitely a lot of things caused by COVID that have brought this to the fore.
Well, out of curiosity, this is a little off topic, but not off topic, but COVID. So how do you think we're doing with that?
Well, as a former politician, or as I like to say, statesman, we always have to take positions. And here's one I'm going to take not being in office. COVID, I'm against it. I'll stand firm and say I'm against COVID.
All right. I'm going to write that down. I'm going to quote you on that
now. Boy, it's really hard to tell. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor. And unfortunately, we've got a whole lot of non-scientists and non-doctors weighing in as if they actually know something. Obviously, it's very, very scary, COVID.
Yes.
It does seem to me, however, there have been a lot of things a lot scarier in this world that exist even now that people make nothing of and make a lot more of COVID. I'm not certain about what's going on with it any more than anybody else.
Right.
Am I being cautious? Yes. I have elderly parents who are in poor health, who I'm a partial caretaker for. Would COVID affect me much? Probably not, based upon what we've seen with statistics. Mm-hmm. It would likely be their demise. So there's good reason to be careful and to be cautious and not spread it to other people. And I think that's what bothers me most about COVID. There's a lot of young people out there who basically didn't give a crap. And so they went out there and didn't care if they got exposed, not knowing that they're causing a lot of harm to other people by spreading.
Sure.
You see so much of it was spread by, the nightclubs in college towns reopening and things along those lines. And, these kids may give it to each other, but they forget they go home and give it to their parents and their grandparents. Sure. And they go to a grocery store and give it to whoever's in there who they may not know. So I mean, is COVID real? Yes. Should we take all the precautions we possibly can? Yes. But I'm glad the economy's reopened. Small businesses can reopen. I'm glad we've learned that we don't have to shut down the world and destroy our country for purposes of trying to fight something that hasn't been as prolific a killer as, thank God, as I think was forecast.
Yeah, there needed to be a balance there.
Yep.
And as a former, as you say, statesman, I like that, actually. When this all kind of started, and then, of course, there's the Safer at Home, there's a lot of just universal support's the best word I can find, or understanding. But it wasn't that long after. It kind of quickly turned very political very fast. And now there just seems to be those two columns, Republican and Democrat. And I'm not just meaning the actual Republican or Democrat elected officials. I mean, if you are just a card-carrying Democrat or a Republican, you are very strong on one side. Why do you think this turned? Okay, that's a stupid question. I was asked, why do you think it turned political? But when you look at it that way, and being a former statesman, is this one of those things where, like, man, I'm so glad I'm not in an elected office right now?
I got to tell you, most of the time since I left office, I've said, man, I'm glad I'm not in elective office now. I put a lot of thought into leaving and why I was leaving, and really had no regrets. If there's one reason, and I actually have a few small regrets lately, and the reasons would be that I would like to be there giving as strong a support as I possibly could to law enforcement. This may be a bipartisan coalition, but the way that law enforcement has been derogated to me is just absolutely unbelievable, and it's not something that I would have stood by and not been outspoken about. So that's probably the only reason I wished I would have been in office. I don't think anybody's going to blame COVID on the Attorney General or say that the Attorney General could have fixed it. I think it really became political because you can't win, first of all. So if a governor closed down too much, they were going to be criticized for closing down too much. And if they didn't close down enough, they were going to be criticized for not closing down enough. And of course, the attacks aren't generally going to come from your own political party. And so your attempt and intent to govern is going to be attacked one way or the other, no matter what you do, which is fairly typical. But it also is political because before I even knew what COVID was, Trump was being hammered for it being all his fault. So it's right out of the gates. It was made to be political, largely, I think, because of the election cycle. I mean, had this been just after an election, maybe it would have been less political and it would have been more like a foreign conflict where everybody rallied around each other.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm a Republican and Democrat. I couldn't care less about that. I mean, I like politics, but yeah, I don't like crazy people. And sometimes, let's face it, when there's some people that are just, I'm so far on this one side, it's like, well, I can't even talk to you. I mean, you just got to use some common sense. I believe this with Scott Walker. I believe this with Tony Evers, that I think they're doing what they think is the best thing. And I could disagree with some of it. And certainly there's always the Monday morning quarterback, or hindsight being what it is. And we could all fix it. But, man, put yourself in those shoes, and it's like, holy cow, I got to do what I think is the right thing, listen to smart people, and make a decision. And you got 5 million people, or half of them are going to tell you that you're wrong all the time. That's a lot. I mean, we get some negative comments and some nasty emails sent to us. I can't imagine having, 5 million. That's no thank you.
Yeah, it's not always fun out there in politics when you walk down the street and somebody openly derogates you just because of the D or the R behind your name. It really is quite ridiculous.
It really is. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get a chance to talk about?
Boy, not that I can think of offhand. It's just that, I can express to your viewers and listeners that if this coalition is something that they are interested in helping to participate in, by all means, reach out to VoteSafe Wisconsin. And if we can answer your questions about how to vote, obviously Wisconsin Election Commission is probably the best place to go, but we're willing to help with that as well. And get the word out. I mean, get the word out that voting is safe and secure in Wisconsin, and that if you want to vote, you can do so safely and securely, and you should.
You know what we should do? After you said this is a work in progress, really going to be definitely a big push for the November election, getting the awareness out. After you start getting things going, let's have you back on in, I don't know, a couple months, right? When we get closer to the general election, give us an update. How are things going now? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of things to update the public on. So I would love to have you back on if you're interested.
Yeah, and I would love to be back on. And,
awesome.
Before we sign off, say hi to your dad for me, will you please?
I will. I talked to him I think I already said I talked to him this morning. And yeah, he's doing a lot better. It's nice to have him home. It really is. So, and it's funny that, well, I don't know if he's going to remember me, but tell him I said hi. Okay, I think he's going to remember you, Dad, but
yeah.
Awesome. JB, thank you so very much for your time today. For more information about VoteSafe Wisconsin, be sure to take some time this week and visit wi.votesafe.us. Special thank you to my guest today, former Wisconsin Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen, the coolest name on the planet. And thank you for watching. Until next time, keep your social distance and have a blessed day.